What's going on, everybody? Captain Mike here. Got another great video coming your way. So my plan today is to hook up the boat, head out on the water, and talk about fishing suspending jerkbaits for those early season bass, walleyes, pike, or whatever else you might like to fish for. The problem is that the wind is blowing about 100 miles an hour out there, so it's going to be interesting to say the least. No matter what, I'm going to figure out a way to share some great tips on fishing jerkbaits during the early season and also show you some cool underwater footage of some of my favorite jerkbaits in action. Stay tuned. It's all coming out right after this. Man, it is really blowing out there. Yikes. Alright guys, Captain Mike here. As we said, we're talking jerkbaits today. And of course, I got a fish on before I even got the cameras turned on. So, you know how it works sometimes. It's a nice walleye too. Not a huge one, but a decent one. We're gonna break down everything we need to know about jerkbaits here. Let me try to get this fish in. It is blowing, as we talked about. I got him. There we go. Oh, this water is cold. It's not much of a fight out of these fish, but still really cool. One of these times of the year where you never know what you're going to catch when you're throwing these suspending jerkbaits, and that's what makes them so fun. It was actually hooked pretty good. All right, nice fish, guys. Nothing huge, but a really nice start. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to fish out here in this wind and do this video at the same time. So we're going to put this guy back, and I'm going to head over, get out of the wind a little bit, break down everything you know about suspending jerkbaits, how to fish them, where to fish them, and what kind of baits I like to use up here in Door County for walleyes like this, smallmouth bass, pike, whatever you like to target. Stay tuned. I'm moving. I'll be right back. All right, guys, well, I found this spot a little bit out of the wind at least. I was hoping I could get over to that spot where we started. There's a lot of fish stacked up in there, but it's just blowing too hard and it's too rough for me to do this video properly. So unfortunately, that's not gonna work, but we got a good spot here, and I really wanna take the time to talk a little bit about suspending jerkbaits during this early season cold water period. I wanna talk about the when we use them, why we use them, where we use them, and then show you some of my favorite jerkbaits and give you some cool underwater footage of those different jerkbaits so you guys can actually see what they look like when they're down there doing their thing. All right, guys, so let's start with the why and why jerkbaits are so effective this time of the year. Basically, jerkbaits allow us to present a large profile bait in a very slow and steady manner. And during this cold water period, both those things are very important. You got to remember, these fish are feeding on larger prey fish right now, or larger bait fish species, as there's not a lot of young of the year hatches yet. The water's cold enough that even the gobies and the crayfish aren't very active at this time. So a lot of what these bass and other species are feeding on is big bait fish or big prey species. They also like that because they need to get their body weight up a little bit from a tough winter, and they also need to prepare themselves for the spawn that's coming. So those bigger profile baits always work best during the cold water period. Now, a lot of those, unfortunately, displace a little too much water, they move too fast, but jerkbaits are kind of the opposite. We can work them very slow, very methodical. We can suspend them, which is the key to their productiveness, and it allows those fish to get those baits without having to work so hard, which is exactly what they're looking for. I often refer to it as fishing fast, slowly. What I mean by that is we're covering a lot of water because we can cast these baits a mile, but we also fish them slow by the suspending nature of it and the slow, subtle action that we impart on it at times. So it's a great way to target these big early season smallmouths and a variety of other fish, as we said, during this cold water period. So let's focus on the where now, guys. Where do we find these fish during this cold water period, and where are the jerkbaits most effective? I'm basically looking at one thing this time of the year, and that's big, slow tapering flats. Those flats that drop from 2 to 3 feet into that 10 or 12 with a very gradual decline. And they need to be near spawning areas. These fish are going to be cruising these big flats, and they're going to be near spawning areas because as that water warms, they're going to want to push up shallow and get near their bedding areas. The other thing you want to look for is a good combination of different types of rock. That mix of big rocks, small rocks, gravel, sand is critical to holding fish this time of the year. Keep that in mind, and you're going to eliminate a lot of unproductive water, and it's going to put you around a lot of fish. So how do we fish these baits? Well, basically, it's fairly simple. We're going to fire these baits out as far as we can, And as I said, they'll cast a mile. And then it's simply a reel it down a little bit, and then it's a jerk, jerk, and then the pause. That pause is absolutely critical to fishing suspending jerkbaits this time of the year. I like to keep it in that 5 to 10 second range between jerks, but sometimes I'll leave it as long as 15 to 20 seconds, and I know guys that'll leave it even longer. I don't have that kind of patience, but I can keep it to about 15 seconds, and that's about my limit. But if you can pause even longer, especially when that water's really cold, it's gonna just get you more bites. The secret to suspending jerkbaits, and if you take nothing else away from this video, remember, long pauses and be patient with them. And the cadence is just something that everybody has a preference to, and on a day-to-day basis, the fish will have a certain preference. Make sure you experiment throughout the day with different types of cadences, but as I said, it's critical that that pause is always there. That's what triggers bites, and that's where the majority of your fish will strike this bait as it's sitting there. Okay guys, so when we're talking about my favorite jerkbaits when it comes to smallmouth bass especially, but walleyes and pike and everything else as we mentioned before, I really like 3 specific ones. So let's start with the first one, and that's the Megabass 110. That's what we caught the walleye on at the beginning of this video. It really is probably my favorite overall jerkbait. Now I understand that there's kind of a love-hate relationship with this bait at times. People love it because it flat out catches fish, and on some days it catches fish when other baits simply don't. The dislike part of it is the price. Obviously, it's a very expensive jerkbait, but it is a premium quality one. And if you like to fish jerkbaits, you need to have at least one, if not a couple, Megabass 110s in the boat. This bait is very unique in a couple different ways. For one, it never darts the same way twice, it seems like. So it implements a lot of different looks to those fish when it's moving through the water column. The second thing is the way it suspends. This bait has a really unique style of suspending. And what I mean by that is when you jerk this bait and you pop it down, for example, it will oftentimes suspend vertically. It will stay there for quite a period of time, and then as you jerk it again a couple times, if it pops back towards an upward plane, it'll often suspend exactly like that. So this bait suspends differently almost every time. This is one, as I said, price aside, you gotta have at least 1 or 2 in the boat. Now, one of my other favorite jerkbaits is the Lucky Craft series. Basically, I look at 3 different ones. 78 pointer, which is a smaller, shallow running bait that works really well in a variety of shallow water applications. Now this bait will suspend, but very often this bait will rise just a little bit as it suspends, which is excellent when we're fishing that shallow water because we don't want that bait getting into those rocks, and if it does, oftentimes it'll drift out of them. So the 78 is my choice for shallow water. If you're looking for the standard in the Lucky Craft series, I almost always defer to the Pointer 100. It fishes exceptionally well in that 6 to 10, 12 feet of water. It'll catch them up shallow if you fish it right. But if you're looking for something to cover those mid-range depths on those flats we talked about, this is the one you want. It's a little fatter, it's a little thicker jerkbait, and it has a very nice suspend to it. It has a deep, loud knocking noise to it, which smallmouth bass especially really like, and it's really one of my favorites that I use a lot during this early cold water period. Another bait I like in the Lucky Craft series is the slender pointer. Now this is a very unique style for the Lucky Crafts because typically, as I said, they're a little bit fatter, a little stockier type of jerkbait. But this bait fishes exceptionally well when you're fishing skinny water, shallow water, or in very clear water or high pressured situations. It doesn't dive quite as deep, and it also displaces a lot less water because of the size of it than the Pointer 100 does. So if you're dealing with fish that are very pressured in shallow clear water or just off the bite a little bit, take a look at the Slender series from Lucky Craft as well, because these will put a lot of fish in the boat under those tough situations. The last one on the list, which is one a lot of guys probably don't use a lot, is a Rogue Elite 8. Now this bait, in theory, was probably designed more for trolling, hence the name 8. Basically refers to getting it down to about 8 feet based on a certain amount of line out, but that's for another video. But this is an excellent jerkbait. Something about this bait that's very unique. And what it does is as you're jerking it through the water column, when you pause it, it often has a tendency to spin around and almost face the opposite direction that it's moving. And it's really cool because when you have fish that are following baits but not committing, I oftentimes will pull the Elite 8 out and throw it because there's something about the way it spins back towards the fish if they're following it that often triggers a reaction bite. So keep the Elite 8 in mind, especially when you're targeting fish that are following, not committing, but are showing some interest. Oftentimes that very unique swing around and face the fish suspending thing that it has going for it catches them when sometimes nothing else will. So guys, that's basically it when it comes to jerkbaits for me. I know there are a ton of jerkbaits on the market. I like the Berkley Cutter is another example. I like a lot of other ones, but get yourself a starting point for something that you're comfortable with and really learn how to fish those. If you don't know where to start, take my advice. Go with a Megabass 110, something from the Lucky Craft series like a Pointer 100 just to start with, and then get that Elite 8 Rogue for those times when the fish just aren't committing to the jerkbait, and you're going to have a great starting package to put a lot of fish in the boat this spring. One thing I want to talk about real quickly here is the rod choice when it comes to fishing suspending jerkbaits. Now everybody's going to have a preference to brands, and some guys will get very specific in the rod that they use. I personally use spinning gear, mainly because a lot of my clients that I fish with each year just don't handle bait casting gear very well. So we've become accustomed to throwing spinning reels and spinning rods for this setup. But this is a really nice setup for a couple of reasons. It allows you to cast these baits a mile. It's much better in the windy conditions that we deal with a lot up here than the bait casters are, unless you're very adept at using them. So for the average guy, I would recommend a spinning rod, especially if you're just getting into jerkbait fishing. I like a 6'10" to 7-foot medium action with a fast or extra fast tip. When it comes to line, I like 8 to 10 pound braid connected to about an 8-foot, 8 to 10 pound fluorocarbon leader. I prefer Berkley line than that Berkley 100% fluorocarbon leader. It's a great setup for targeting these early season fish, especially in this ultra clear water. That fluorocarbon leader is key. You can see as the bait is in the water, very often you'll see the reflection off the braid, but that fluorocarbon leader will disappear in that water column. And when fish come up, that fluorocarbon leader not giving anything away is critical. Plus, it's actually a little tougher if you do happen to drag it across shell beds, zebra mussel beds, or a variety of other rocks that we're going to be facing, especially when targeting smallmouth bass in most environments. So focus on that 6 to 10 foot medium action with a fast or extra fast tip, and it will be a great starting setup for your suspending jerkbait fishing. So guys, that was basically a crash course in suspending jerkbaits. Kind of Jerkbaits 101 with a couple little ideas in there that hopefully will help you catch a few more fish this spring or throughout the entire season on these suspending jerkbaits. They work great in that cold water, as we said, but don't put them away once the water warms up. They will catch fish year round. Guys, if you like this video, please subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on all the great videos we have on the page right now and all the new ones that'll be coming out real soon. If you have any comments or questions, put them down in the section below this video, and I'll add a couple of the baits that we talked about in the description as well. Thanks again, guys, and we'll talk to you real soon with another brand new video. I'm going to catch some more fish.